My name is Josh. I'm from Youngstown, Ohio, and I have 3 years in recovery.
Josh, thank you for taking the time out of your busy schedule to come to On the Road to Recovery today here at Open United Recovery Place in Portage County. We really appreciate you taking the time.
Yeah, I appreciate you guys having me.
Josh, can you share a little bit about your childhood, your family relationships, if you experienced any trauma, addiction, stuff like that?
I grew up in a really good family, big Italian family, um, until I was about the age of 12 or 13, and my parents divorced. I'm the oldest of three brothers, so it was a real confusing time, like in eighth grade, and that's when I started, experimenting with drugs and alcohol, um, you know, witnessing, physical and mental abuse. So yeah, it was a trying time, and it's really what started a 24 years of an addiction.
So, what was that first use like, and what did it do for you?
My first use, it made me be somebody that I wasn't. When I say that, I mean like I could be, I could be the cool kid. I could be a part of, the social groups in school. I struggled after my parents divorced, with like feeling alone all the time, and partying was where it was at. I figured if I could be the biggest partier, people would accept me. Um, the only sport I played in school was soccer. It was the one that I was really good at, and so between partying and playing soccer, like that's what I put all my time and energy into. And you know, unfortunately, my junior year, I was kicked off the team because of drugs and alcohol, just partying too much. Came back my senior year, and it just wasn't the same. I always, wonder. I was really good. I actually made the junior Olympic team twice, um, my freshman and sophomore year. And if I always wonder if I wasn't partying so much and I actually, focused on school and focused on athletics, if I could have taken it somewhere. So that was another thing I always struggled with too.
Do you have any military experience?
So I graduated high school and went to college for a year with 19 of my closest friends, and it was a complete shit show. I maybe went to class a couple of times, got kicked out, and called my dad one day after they expelled me from college and needed to go to treatment. At that time, I didn't never been to treatment. I didn't know what treatment was. Went to a 28-day program because back then it was 28 days. There wasn't any of this long-term stuff. And while I was in treatment, I was trying to figure out what I wanted to do with my life. I knew school wasn't the answer. So I had an aunt that was in the Army. And I said, well, I'm going to join the Army. And I tried to join the Army and got disqualified when I went for my physical. And I came back to the recruiter office that day, and a Marine recruiter was standing outside. And he was like, what's going on with you? I've been seeing you come here for a long time. Why aren't you, why haven't you left for boot camp? And I told him what was going on, and he said, if you really want to join, come see me Monday morning, and I'll have you gone in 90 days. So I went and saw him Monday morning, and he got a waiver to get me through the physical, and off to boot camp I went and joined the Marine Corp.
During your service in the military, did you continue your addiction?
So before I left for boot camp, I was clean. I got out of rehab, but I went back to using maybe a month before I left for boot camp. And I got to boot camp, and the first couple weeks at Paris Island is like a receiving where they try to weed you out. And I remember one day we went, they made us all line up in the restroom for a drug screen, and I get into the stall, and I know I'm going to fail. I just used a week ago. And I turned to the kid behind me, a little kid from Kentucky, and I said, you're going to pee in this cup for me. And he kind of looked at me all crazy, and I said, you're going to do it. And so he did. And the Marine Corps has a funny way of doing things. They wait till you complete halfway through before they tell you if you failed or not. So I remember clearly the day they came around, and they came down the row and they were tapping people on the shoulder that failed. and the guy got right next to me and stopped, and my heart just sunk in my chest because I'm trying to figure out at this point, what am I going to tell my parents? And then he moved right past me, and come to find out later on, the kid said, because he made it through too, and he came to me and he said, I smoked weed before I came down here, so I don't know how we made it. And that was kind of our little joke the whole time through boot camp. But then moving on, I stopped using for quite a while, and I didn't pick back up until I got deployed overseas. I'd been hearing from like old timers from the Vietnam War and World War II that you could buy things legally in the pharmacies and over in Asia and Japan. And so my addictive thinking was, oh, I got to go check this out. And I used the whole time I was deployed. It was insanity at its finest. I mean, I remember we had a PT test, and we had been up all night using and drinking, and the next day I ran the worst PFT I had ever ran in my life. And it kind of went on like that for a long time, and the 6 months before I was supposed to discharge from the Marine Corps, I came back home to Cleveland because my mom lived in Cleveland at the time. And on my way out of North Carolina, I flipped a car 3 times at the North Carolina-Virginia line. And I had come back to base, and I had blown my back out and messed my legs up really bad, nerve damage. And so the Naval Hospital was giving me all kinds of painkillers, and I just, it was a legal excuse. Now I had an excuse to use, and my unit was getting ready to deploy again, and I didn't get to go on that deployment because of it. And so I got out and went right back to the streets, to what I know. So.
Did you experience any trauma while in the military?
Yeah. So, I've had a number of friends, died during the Iraq and Afghanistan. I remember one day there was a ship that came into port, and it was like a hospital ship coming from Iraq, and we were tasked with going down and helping them off the ship. And I just remember seeing guys, faces blown off and missing body parts, and then shortly after that we were sent to Sri Lanka. They got hit by tsunamis real bad in 2005. And we were tasked with taking over the airport and guarding food and water distribution. And the death and destruction there was just crazy. I mean, I used to have really bad dreams about it for a long time. I mean, it was intense. And that was another thing that fueled my addiction, because I just didn't want to think about those things anymore.
So after you were discharged, were you offered any help or support to help deal with some of the things that you saw?
No, I wasn't. I actually moved in with a friend, and right back, to what I knew best, like I said, was the streets, the street life. After my parents had divorced, the streets was what raised me, really. And we go back to what we know best, and that's what I knew best. And the military didn't offer any. In fact, when I got out, I didn't know about, getting any counseling or seeing a therapist or Medicaid. Like, I knew nothing about any of that stuff. It wasn't until years later, after going through treatment and, numerous incarcerations, going to prison, that I found out about services that were offered to me.
How did your disease progress?
Well, from that first one, when I was 12 or 13 years old, I was hooked. And it started out, like I said, drinking and smoking weed, and then it progressed into whatever you had, all throughout high school. And then the military, like opiates was always my main love. And when I got out of the Marine Corps, I got experienced with cocaine, and it was my love. I mean, I between those two substances, I just fell in love, and it just got progressively worse. A lot of people have had chances to go to treatment. I've only been to treatment a handful of times. My treatment was always incarceration, and it was like I was incarcerated you know, every 6 months, every year for about 15 years, I was incarcerated, except for the 3 years that I did in prison. I mean, ever since I went to prison in 2007, I've been incarcerated every year. In fact, this past Christmas was only the second Christmas I've been home for since I went into the Marine Corps in 2003.
How were your relationships with your family and friends impacted during your use?
So my mom cut me off for a long time. My grandparents were my biggest supporters. My grandmother died in 2016, and that was my whole world. I mean, I was devastated. She, when I was in prison, she was the only one that came and saw me in North Carolina. Like, in her eyes, I could do no wrong. All the time, energy, and money that they've put out to help me over the years, and then she passed away, and it was like my best friend was gone. And I remember the day of her funeral, in the parking lot of the funeral home, I got high before going in to deal with it. My dad and I have always had a rocky relationship ever since my parents had divorced. But my grandma made him promise that on her deathbed that he would stick by me for her. And even though we didn't get along very well, he did. My brothers, I had no relationship with. I have a half sister that is my dad's daughter, and I just got to meet her for the first time a few years ago. And it's tough right now because, like, we'll see each other, and, like, they interact with my brothers, but she doesn't really interact because she doesn't know me. And she's like, I think she's still nervous about trying to get to know me. And it was tough. I mean, like I said, my family was the streets. That's what I turned to, and that was my I tell people all the time, like, the hardest thing for me was escaping the streets. The drugs were just a part of it.
What happened that you decided to get help, and were there any barriers that were stopping you, whether insurance or anything?
So my last run was during COVID. I got raided by the state police, my ex and I was also on the run from probation and parole at the time. The state police raided us, and I went back to incarceration. I really truly believe at that time I was going back to prison. I had new felony cases. I'm already a 7-time felon. I'm on felony probation and parole at the time. And with the amount of trouble I was in now, I thought for sure I was going away to do football numbers. And I had, like, became okay with that. I had sat and stewed on it, and, like, I had to be okay with it, But what I did was, in booking at my preliminary hearing, I begged my ex at the time to please take the new cases, and for some reason she did. She just came home from prison. That was in the summer of 2020, August of 2020. She just came home about 3 weeks ago. So she took the cases, and then from there, I put in my own footwork. Since I was a frequent flyer at the jail that I was in, I hate to say this, but I had a little pool, with the counselors and everything. So I got one of the counselors to give me a phone call to a sober living program in Youngstown that I had been to before. So he set up a phone interview one day. I went down there and talked to them, and they were like, yeah, you can come back. So they sent a letter over to the judge and to the jail. So when I went for my parole violation hearing, the judge that I went in front of was the Veterans Court judge, who I had been kicked out of his court a year earlier. And it was weird. It's God. I know it's all God. I go to court because, for one, I didn't even have him as a judge. I got called over to his court out of the blue one day. So I go to court, and he goes, Mr. Marriotti, we had a staffing the other day, myself, the district attorney, and your attorney, on you specifically and your cases. and we were all in agreement that we're going to give you one last opportunity. We have the letter from the sober living program. He goes, so what we're going to do is, he goes, I'm going to give you the max county sentence I can give you, 2 years minus a day. I had already been incarcerated for about 7.5 months at that point. He goes, I'll give you time served.
While being a veteran, and then on top of that having a few prison numbers, how has your employment changed in your recovery?
So when I was living in sober living, the only education I have was a high school diploma. Excuse me. So my dad has had a construction company for about 30 years, and I've always been able to go work for him anytime, like when I'm doing good anyways. So while I was living sober living, he was like, come work for me. It'll give you a chance to save some money, pay off your fines, get a driver's license, get back on your feet until you're ready to move out on your own again. So I did that for a whole summer. And that's what I did. Like, I socked money away working for him. Yeah, it was roofing and putting up buildings and siding, and like it's work that I don't like doing, but I had to humble myself and do it, and realize there's a bigger cause here. And that summer I saved enough money where I was able to go pay off all my fines on a Monday. On Tuesday, I went to the BMV and turned in all my court releases and took the driving test. And on a Thursday, I got a car. All in 1 week. So that summer, I was really trying to think, like, what do I want to do with my life? And I know that God put a purpose and a plan on my life, right? And my brother is an HR at a treatment center, and he said, well, we're hiring resident techs. Why don't you come work part-time and see if you like it? Well, part-time turned into full-time within a month because I loved it. And I was like, man, like, this is the best thing ever. I get to help other people like me, and they get to be around other people like me 24/7. And it's a good reminder for me and from where I came from. So I worked there for about 6 months, and while I was working there, someone told me about obtaining a clinical license in Ohio. So I went through the chemical dependency counselor assistant program, obtained my CDCA December of 21, and got my first job as a chemical dependency counselor that January. It took a little while to find a place that would hire me. I am a veteran, but at the same time, like I said, I'm a 7-time felon, and like, I don't get caught up in, that's the biggest hurdle for people like me, is that people will tell us, oh, well, you have a bad record, or you're a felon and you can't do this, you can't do that, oh, you're a recovering addict, you won't be able to do this or that. And I don't get caught up in that stuff. I truly believe whatever God puts on your heart, you can do. And God put it on my heart to help people. And I finally landed a job at my first agency, and man, it was like a breath of fresh air. I loved it. Unfortunately, that March 15th of 22, I was on my way home from work one night and got pulled over for speeding. And the police said that I had a warrant out of Akron, Ohio from 2013. I told them, I said, it can't be. I took care of all that stuff. Well, they didn't want to hear it, so they took me to the local county jail and waited for Akron to come get me the next day. I went to Akron. I spent 30 days incarcerated in Akron for them to realize that it was a clerical error. They never closed my probation out. So I lost my job. Thank God, in this process, I learned how to save money, and I learned how to open a bank account, and I have my family back, right? So my family, I have 2 cats. My family took care of my 2 cats, my house, because at this point I have my own house. So they took care of all that stuff for me while I was in jail for 30 days. Like I said, I got out. I lost my job over it. And so for that next month, I was in distress. I mean, if I have to sit here and tell you like everything was okay, I'd be lying to you. I finally one day I had a mental breakdown. I was working for my dad again, back working for my dad, And I just had a complete meltdown. And I get in the truck with my dad. Says, "Get in the truck." I get in the truck with him, and I'm crying. And my dad's not an emotional type guy, and like, so for me to cry around him is kind of hard. I'm crying, and he got some tears, and like I never seen that before. And he goes, "Call that guy that you have." And I said, "That guy?" And he said, "Yeah, that guy that you have, that mentor guy." He was talking about my sponsor. He said, "Call him right now." So I called my sponsor, and we put him on speakerphone, and the two of them were talking to me, and they talked me through it. And my sponsor told me, it was like 1 o'clock in the afternoon, he said, "God got something better for you. There's a better plan waiting for you. You just can't see it at the moment, right?" I had 2 meetings that night. I had a men's spiritual meeting and then a 12-step meeting. And at different times of the night, I spoke to 5 different people. And every one of them had the same response. God got a better plan for you. There's something greater in store for you. You just got to be patient and trust the process. It's coming. He took you out of one situation to put you into something better. And it took about a month because agencies were like, "No, we can't. Your criminal record just can't. We can't hire you." And finally, an inpatient treatment center said absolutely, because I had all these people advocating for me. I had people from the job that I lost advocating for me. I had people from recovery, like all these people that I networked and met just through recovery were advocating for me. So I got another job. And again, I'd like to say that worked out. They closed in November. They closed down. And at that time, I had, like I said, I learned how to save money. And I had saved a significant amount of money up. And something that had always been put on my heart was to open a recovery house for men. So I told my parents about it one day, and they were both on board, and they both cut me a check for a significant amount of money, and they said, "Follow your dream." And I found a house, and I opened a men's sober living house in Youngstown. And then around that same time period, I had met another gentleman who owns an outpatient behavioral health agency, and he said, "Why don't we partner?" He goes, "I see the drive in you," and he goes, "And I know you from recovery." He goes, "I know all the great things that you're doing." He goes, "Let's partner." And so we partnered, and it's been an amazing experience ever since.
So what dreams do you have for your future?
Well, currently my dream is to open more houses. There's such a huge need for sober living houses, not only just in this area, but in all areas of Ohio. Men and women go to treatment, but then there's nowhere for them to go afterwards to continue, learning how to have structure and routine, and just, learn how to stay clean one more day, And so my goal is to open more. One day I'd like to open my own agency.
I'd like you to share some inspiration and hope for those who are still struggling with substances.
I just want to share with all of you that you can do this. You can do it one day at a time. They say you have to change one thing, and that's everything. And to me in early recovery, that felt overwhelming. But when you get a support group and you get involved, that's the biggest thing I can tell you. Get a support group. Find a group that you enjoy going to, and that people that can help you, and stick with it and trust the process, and just keep living this one day at a time. The best thing I can tell you is that we don't have to pick up anymore. Today I'm a part of that no matter what club. No matter what, I'm not going to pick up just for today.
Josh, thank you so much for taking the time out of your busy schedule to join us here at Open United Recovery Place in Portage County. You are shared an amazing inspiration and hope for those who still need to hear it most. Your story will help to spread awareness, humanize addiction, end stigma, and inspire hope one story at a time.
Thank you. Appreciate it.